Good morning, everybody, and welcome. We are privileged to welcome here today Philip Goldberg, an award-winning author and co-author of numerous books. Amongst his many books are American Veda, From Emerson and the Beatles to Yoga and Meditation, How Indian Spirituality Changed the World. The definitive biography of Paramahansa Yogananda, the life of Yogananda, the story of the yogi who became the first modern guru, spiritual practice for crazy times, powerful tools to cultivate calm, clarity, and courage, and his latest book, published this year, Karmic Relief, Harnessing the Laws of Cause and Effect for a Joyful, Meaningful Life. Phil has been studying the world's spiritual traditions for more than 50 years as a practitioner, teacher, and author. His numerous articles have appeared in publications ranging from the Los Angeles Times and Huffington Post to spirituality and health. As a public speaker and workshop leader, he has presented at leading venues online and in person. As a spiritual counselor, meditation teacher, and ordained interfaith minister, he hosts the Spirit Matters podcast and writes substantive essays on his Substack platform, Practical Spirituality with Philip Goldberg. He's also an active board member of the Association for Spiritual Integrity. The subject of Phil's talk today is karma, what it is, what it's not, and why it's important to understand. Phil, welcome again.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Diane. And it's always a strange experience hearing an introduction of yourself. It's like, who are they talking about? It's an honor to be here. I have just such warm feelings and high regard for this lineage going back to Sri Ramakrishna and Vivekananda. And I have had to, especially for American Veda, research this lineage and speak to many of the Swamis who are here in the States and in my visits to Bellar Mutt, and I just have the highest regard for this lineage and the influence it's had over the course of 120 some odd years now here in the West. So I'm very happy to be here, and again, I've been here before. Let me tell you a little bit about how this book on karma came to be. Back in the late 1960s, when I first, as a college student here in New York, I'd like to say I was a toddler, but I was really when I began my own spiritual seeking, getting books from Weiser's esoteric bookstore downtown, where they had books that were not in regular bookstores then. The first Bhagavad Gita I came across was by Swami Prabhavananda and Christopher Isherwood, published by the Vedanta Press. And then I read a great deal of their publications. And it was through at first, Westerners interpreting Vedanta, Aldous Huxley and Christopher Isherwood and others, Houston Smith, Joseph Campbell. And then I went to the sources, and when I heard about the Gita, I couldn't find a copy until I went to Weiser's downtown. Now, of course, I have 15 different translations on my shelves, and it's available, and it's largely through the work of this lineage. And among the many things that changed my life in those days was certain concepts that are core to Vedanta and yoga philosophy and non-dual Buddhism and others that I was exploring, and one of them was karma. And I had trouble with karma because it was like, really? Really? We reap what we sow? You know, there's a cosmic justice, and, you know, at the time, you know, Vietnam War was raging and the civil rights movement. I said, I don't see justice here, you know, and I see too many innocent people suffering and scoundrels being rewarded, and I wasn't sure. And I had kind of a rational approach to spirituality, which is one of the reasons the Vedanta teachings were so important to me, because they made sense. Karma and reincarnation, I'm not so sure. But over time, they grew on me as my own spiritual experiences deepened, and my way of looking at the world changed. And ultimately, I said, okay, I think I can lean in that direction, that the universe operates under laws of karma, just as it operates under gravity and thermodynamics, and the physics principle that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. I can buy that can apply to human behavior and human thought as well as physical objects. I can't prove it, but I'll lean in that direction. And being a very I always was attracted to Vivekananda's term, practical Vedanta. Maybe that's why my Substack is called Practical Spirituality, but I've always been practical about the spiritual life. And I thought it was more practical to accept that karma is real than to assume it's not. Because if I assume karma is real, I'll behave myself. I'll make better decisions. I'll lean in the direction of doing the right thing and not shortcutting on ethics or morality. And then I realized, well, if more people felt that way, the world would be a better place. So let's lean in that direction. Act as if it's a proven fact. And over the years, as both a spiritual practitioner and a teacher and a writer, one of my tasks, especially when I started researching American Veda and ever since, was to see how the teachings of the East in their various forms influence life in America and the spiritual landscape here. And that's why I wrote that book. And how I came to know so many of the Swamis in this lineage. And I noticed that karma was one of those ideas, one of those concepts that had caught on. It showed up in people's speech, everyday language. And then I would notice it on the newscasts or in a sports report, the Knicks karma, you know, and in sitcoms and in movies, and then in song titles. And I did a search, and there's like more than 100 song titles with karma in it. And most recently, you know, Taylor Swift, of all people, has a song called Karma. Willie Nelson had a song called with karma in the title. And a lot of singers you've never heard of have them. And I said, there's something going on here that's not just, you know, we adopt vocabulary words from other cultures, other languages that for which there's no English equivalent. And sometimes it's something trivial, like cinnamon, or and even a number of terms. But karma has overtones of how you look at the world. And so if people are using this suggests that they're seeing the world in terms of karma, or at least to some degree, or at least they think they are. And at the same time, I don't know if you remember, but back in the 80s, there was a series of television specials called Comic Relief. They were raising money for charities. And once, being a wise guy, I said something, I used the term karmic relief as a joke, and then I said, oh, that's a good book title. Maybe I'll file that away and maybe I'll use it someday. I wasn't sure what the book was. But then I noticed all this stuff, and when I saw that Taylor Swift had a song called Karma, I said, oh, maybe I should resurrect that idea. And my wife kept encouraging me. Every once in a while she'd say, you should write that book about karma. And one of the reasons I finally did was I noticed not only that it was a popular word and showing up in all these places, but it was being misused in a lot of ways. And there were a lot of misconceptions about it and a lot of assumptions about what karma is that I thought needed to be corrected. And as with so many other aspects of Vedanta and yoga and other systems that came from the Indic traditions, the traditions born in India, they have a transformative effect on people's lives and on the spiritual landscape in general. But they are also subject to misinterpretation and dilution and distortion, and that people who care about these things, like everyone present here probably, should make a point of correcting when they can. And so I take that, I feel a responsibility to some degree. And so I took on the book as a way, for one thing, to correct some of those misconceptions and to discuss how the understanding of karma and the application of it in our lives can be transformative and change things for the good in our lives and our families and our civilization. So that was the thing. So I want to, that was my rationale. So I want to talk a little bit about some of those misuses or misinterpretations. One is that karma is about retribution, or only about retribution. So if you look at how it's used in most people's language or in popular culture, it's usually used when something bad happens. You don't hear it when the team is doing well. You hear it when the team is, the Mets' karma is terrible, when there's a disaster or something tragic happens, like, someone's car is stolen or they get sick or they have an accident. Oh, karma. Or there's sometimes in social context where there's injustice and group or a hurricane or something, poor people's karma. You don't hear it when something good happens. And something good is happening a lot in people's lives, and you never hear them say, oh, my good karma that, I had a good medical diagnosis, or I have these grandchildren, or whatever. So it's thought of as karmas, and the popular music is a giveaway. Almost all those songs with karma in it, it's about, you done me wrong. Now karma's going to get you. And but karma's a law, if it's a law of nature and if it's the way the universe operates, then all the good stuff is karma too. And we take it for granted. So that's one thing. Related to that is people talk about karma as though it's a system of reward and punishment. Some overtone of theistic way of looking at the world, like we're being judged. So we're rewarded for good behavior or punished for bad behavior. Naughty boy, you know. It's much more efficacious, I think, and much more practical, and probably much more accurate to the way the universe operates, to think rather than in terms of rewards and punishments, just in terms of cause and effect. The way we have cause and effect in physics or in biology. Certain forces are created, vibrations are sent out, energy is sent out, it has consequences. It has effects. It has results. So thinking in terms of results and consequences may be more acceptable to most people, especially in the West, than thinking in terms of I'm being rewarded or I'm being punished, something bad happens. It has much more practical overtone, and it removes the judgment and the shame and all those kinds of and other unfortunate things. To think of it in this as analogous to laws of physics or principles in nature. Also related to that is we along with rewards, and the rewards and punishment part is within a model of the universe as a kind of judicial system, where there's a magistrate determining guilt and innocence and doling out sentences or rewards. One of the sources of my research in doing this book was Swami Vedanta, who was here, I know, recently talking about his book. And we had conversations, and I read his material, and he pointed me in certain directions, because he's an academic of some stature, and I'm not. I'm a writer. I always joke with my academic friends that my job is to take what you've learned and make it readable. And one of the things I learned from him was that some scholars look at karma as an evolutionary model. And that makes a great deal of sense to me. And that goes back to Ramakrishna and Vivekananda, that it's an educational system, not a judicial one. And that if karma can be said to have a purpose, the purpose is educational. Vedanta told me that Ramakrishna used to say that the purpose of karma was to create saints. Stuff happens. Good stuff happens, bad stuff happens. If we accept that whatever happens is the result of our actions in the past, and that those actions include things we say, things we think, things we feel, what we intend, what our motivations are. It's not just physical action. If those actions and thoughts and words go out into the universe and come back to us in some form or another, then every experience is shaped by the past. And the results, the consequences that we encounter are part of our lesson plan. We're here to learn. And if you think of reincarnation as an integral part of a theory of karma, and I don't see how you can escape doing that. Then we assume that we came into this life with a lesson plan and that we're adjusting it all along the way. It's independent study, right? And we're creating a lesson plan and learning and growing. And if we learn the right lessons, we matriculate. We get to move on to the next lesson in our curriculum. Whereas if we don't learn the right lessons, we get left back, as we used to say in public school. We have to repeat that grade. We have to take that class again. And that's how phenomena like repeated mistakes keep coming up in our lives, and why you say every once in a while, why does this keep happening to me? Why does every friendship have this pattern? Why do I have this series of relationships? Why does this happen? Why do I make the same mistakes in business? Or why does the same good stuff keep happening? Even the good stuff can be repeated, and you want to move on to better stuff. And so thinking of karma as not a judicial system, but an educational one, keeps us alert to what are the lessons here? What do I have to learn? What is this teaching me? And what is the right lesson? Because it's very easy to fool ourselves and say, oh, I've learned from that experience. But did we learn the right lesson? Or do we learn a convenient lesson? And a lesson that, makes us feel good and gives an easy way out. Sometimes the right lesson is a harder one and requires something of us. And these are things to keep in mind. And to think of everything that we do and say and feel and intend, setting out frequencies and vibrations that come reverberate back to us, may be a healthier way to look at karma than to think of rewards and punishments and judgments. The other aspect of it is sometimes people think of karma as a kind of fatalism or predeterminism, that everything's determined, everything is spelled out, it's karma, come back to you, nothing you could do about it. That's not the case. That's not how karma is properly understood. And Vivekananda wrote about this a lot. Karma is a statement of freedom. And with that freedom, responsibility. Yes, everything that happens has in some way been determined by the past or caused by the past. And everything we do now is in some way going to determine the future. But we're here now. And we have the freedom. Because karma, it assumes freedom of choice. It assumes free will. And I don't want to get bogged down in the thousands of years of debate about whether we actually have free will or it only appears that we have free will, because that's unanswerable. I quote Alan Watts in my book saying something like, do you remember Alan Watts, a great thinker and interpreter of Eastern philosophy? He said something like, I can't remember exactly, but as free beings we are determined, and as determined beings we are free. So there's some of both, but our experience is we make choices, and we make choices all the time. It's not just the big decisions. We're making choices. Should I open the door? Should I take the subway? Should I, what should I do? And for the most part, we're not thinking about these choices. We just make them. And that's freedom. But with the freedom comes responsibility. So we have the freedom to change our karma, to modify our karma, to react to the moment that whatever karma has created in the present, how we go forward in life depends on how we react and the choices we make now. So if you did stuff in the past that's going to come back in some undesirable way, it's like taking out a loan, taking out a business loan. It's going to come due. You don't know when, in this case, in karma, in a business contract, you know when it's coming due. But by analogy, you do something, and in some form, it's going to come back to you according to the laws of karma. You don't know when, you don't know in what form, but it's going to come back to you. What you do in the interim is going to determine how you'll react when the loan becomes due. So by analogy, if you take out a loan and you run a successful business and you make a profit, then when the loan comes due, it's not a big deal. It's just the course of doing business. You have enough resources to cover it. And whereas if you don't, and you squander the money and you're careless and you make mistakes, then when the loan comes due, you're in trouble. And it's a similar thing with us. How we behave, once we set things in motion is going to alter. Everything we do goes out to the cosmos with a self-addressed stamped envelope. But the content that comes back in that envelope, we get to modify as we go along. And then how we react when it arrives on our doorstep is up to us, and how we move forward. So this is, not only do we have that freedom, not only is everything not, in a sense, predetermined, but we have a responsibility as well, not only to ourselves, but to our loved ones, our neighborhood, our family, to do the right thing and create better karma going forward. The other thing karma's not is an excuse for being indifferent. I see smiles because we've all probably, many of us have heard when something unfortunate happens, or we become aware of people suffering, individuals or groups. I've heard too many people say, well, it's their karma. Nothing I can do about it. It's their karma. It's been used as an excuse to exploit people. It's been used as an excuse to evade responsibility. Well, it's their karma. And it's even taken a step further in some cases where people say, not just, well, it's their karma, but it would be wrong to intervene because the karma has to play out fully, otherwise it will repeat. So, now, if you were to walk across Central Park West and see somebody laying on the floor because they tripped and they can't get up, do you say, that's their karma, I'll just keep walking? Well, you can apply that to many situations in life where there's people being exploited, people being caught up in natural disasters or crimes or whatever it is, people are suffering. You could say, well, it's their karma, and that's inarguable, because if karma is real, then yes, it's their karma. But it's also their karma that you or we become aware of it. That's the good part of their karma. Oh, it's not happening in isolation where no one knows it's going on. And it's your karma, my karma, that we become aware of it and can perhaps do something. So My feeling is, when I hear that, think about it. Yes, it's their karma. Your karma is, what are you going to do? What will create better karma for you moving forward? Being indifferent, being callous, being unconcerned, or being compassionate and being kind and doing something helpful if you have the power to do it. Because that's karma too. So these things get complicated, and speaking of complicated, one of the things that often happens when people talk about karma or bring it up in conversation is something happens, usually something negative, and then people say, well, you must have done something in the past, or you must have been a such and such in your previous life. Oh, your house was broken into, you must have been a thief in your previous life. Karma is much more complicated than that. You can't necessarily, for one thing, no one ever said there's a one-to-one correspondence, that anything that happens has a single event in the past that created it. We're creating karma all the time. By analogy, if you drop a pebble or a stone into a pond, it'll send out ripples and hit the shore and come back. So a scientist can probably calculate when it's coming back to its point of origin, what the amplitude and all that stuff. But if you drop 10 stones in the pond at rapid succession, or 100, and other people are throwing stones in, you can't keep track. You can't predict when the effect of any particular pebble. And we're throwing pebbles into the pond of karma all the time with every word we speak, every action we take, every decision we make. And so are the people in our lives who affect us, our karma affects our family and our neighbors and whatever to varying degrees. Well, so their actions affect us. And everything gets thrown into the pot, which is why in the Bhagavad Gita there's a passage where Krishna says, the course of karma is unfathomable. Some translations are, the ways of karma are difficult to understand or impossible to comprehend, different language. But the point is that the details are beyond our comprehension. We just know there's cause and effect operating in the world, that karma can get complicated, and it's not just one thing causes another. It's a mix of stuff that we do that creates waves coming back to us. So thinking about it, trying to analyze it, is not encouraged. Just radical acceptance. This is what's happened. It's the result of karma. What do I do now? How do I behave going forward? How can I ameliorate the effects of an unwanted karma? How can I magnify and enhance the effects of good karma? How can I use and understand the laws of karma to be to change my karmic conditions going forward and help others? So that leads to the practical component of my book and the understanding of karma. And so when I was doing the research, I looked into every religious system, every culture has its ethical codes, its moral codes. What's distinctive about the traditions that come from the East, whether you look at the yamas and niyamas in the Yoga Sutras, or the paramitas in the Buddhist tradition, or when you look at them, they're not just do's and don'ts. And they're certainly not commandments. Those of you who are familiar with the yamas and niyamas in the Yoga Sutras, you may have heard naive people call them the 10 Commandments of Hinduism. Because there are 10. But they're not commandments. It's not thou shalt not or you'll be punished and go to hell and all that. They're more like guidelines. They're more like suggestions. They're in the spirit of, we all want to evolve and have better lives, and we all want ultimately liberation, moksha, enlightenment. We want to transcend the laws of karma and uncover the divinity within us. That's the whole point of Vedanta and the Vedanta Society. And there's that tattvam asi, thou art that, that's beyond karma. And the connecting to that divinity within us, that unity, is part of the ways we liberate ourselves from the conditioning of past karma. Because we bring into our individuality that universal quality of, or the universal status of divinity, of pure consciousness or Brahman, or whatever. But along the way, we have to learn to behave ourselves. And so there are ethical guidelines. But if you look at them, it's fascinating because they're what you would expect. Don't steal, don't lie, be kind, be generous. But along with those are things like how to build your character, how to cultivate certain qualities, certain traits, like serenity and purity. And those are not behavioral guidelines. They are pointing you to more fundamental change. So the Vedantic texts will point out that our actions in the world are based on thought and the mind, and then there's subtler and subtler levels of our individual manifestation. And that action is one thing, but how we think, how we perceive, how we discern and evaluate, those things determine our actions. And how we perceive is determined by what you might think of as the state of our being, the quality of our character, the degree to which we are expressing our true nature as divine beings in the world, the capacity of our hearts. So the guidelines we see in these systems are not just do this and don't do that. It's be this and don't be that. It's cultivating qualities that lead naturally to better behavior and better choices. And that would be the ultimate goal of yoga, of Vedanta, of the Buddhist precepts. Not just behave yourself, do this, don't do that, but be something different. Transform yourself from within. Express the deepest and purest and best qualities that are your inherent nature. So you cultivate compassion, you cultivate the qualities of love and generosity and so forth. And that's different from just do this and don't do that. And that was a revelation to me. And it shouldn't have been. I should have known this because I've been studying this stuff since I was a toddler. But seeing it spelled out in the precepts and codes of conduct and so forth was fascinating to me. And that's something to bear in mind. And ultimately, it comes back to, yes, we have to pay attention to what we do and what we say and how we behave in the world. But what we really want is to transform ourselves from within so that doing the right thing is our default setting. Because so much of what we do is just automatic. We don't think it through. So if your GPS internally is set for goodness, because that's what you are, and you're expressing that, then you're more likely to do the right thing and not do the wrong thing without thinking about it. And that's where spiritual practice comes in. And that's why built into these codes is meditate every day, do your sadhana, have a devotional practice. All those kinds of fundamental points of advice have practical consequences. And the consequence is to ultimately transcend karma altogether, but in the meantime, as long as we're here and subject to the laws of karma, to function in a way that produces better karma for ourselves and the people we care about, and the collective karma that of the groups we're part of. So I think it's a good time to open up the floor. Do you agree, Diane?
I agree.
Lovely talk.
Thank you.
My name is Shilpa. One question that comes to me all the time is that if there's someone in need of help and you've repeatedly offered it and they've repeatedly refused, what is my karma?
I didn't hear the last one.
And if they repeatedly refuse?
Refuse your help?
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
How do you go about your karma?
That's very interesting. And you would have to say that that person's karma is leading them to refuse your help, that your karma is leading you to be refused. So what is that about? I'm afraid I don't have the answer, but it's something to contemplate. And then you would be forced to contemplate, am I offering the help for the right reasons? Am I offering it in the right way so that it's properly received? And if I am, what is it about that person's karma or feelings toward me why are they refusing my help? And this is this is an individual matter. I'm sure that it's a relationship that's not cut and dried, as so many of our relationships do. I mean, I was talking to somebody about before I came here about why we're born into the families we're born into. That's a mystery in itself. And the complications of relationships get pretty thorny, and there's no easy formula, but those are the kind of questions that would have to be asked if you care. And at a certain point, maybe you have to stop trying. But on the other hand, maybe you do it differently. Some of these things, I have to say this, when you think about karma and how it operates and all this, and things that repeat themselves in our lives, some of it, you could just say, well, let's forget about abstract concepts like karma for now, and let's just go talk to a psychotherapist.
Is it indifference, or you wait till that person is receptive?
Or is there something you could do that can help that person become more receptive in how you're making the offering? And you don't know if the person ever will become receptive. You could just, you do the best you can, you do the right thing. And we all have that in our lives. We have our loved ones, we say, well, and at a certain point you say, well, if I try to help again, they're just going to be angry. And, so maybe I should be hands off. But, on the other hand, why don't you listen to me? I'm here as your messenger, and it gets thorny. I know. So that's where, open-mindedness and a big heart comes in. Is sometimes the generous thing is to not intervene. So, yeah. Oh, the microphone, right.
Hi there. Thank you so much. It's very thought-provoking and helpful. I'm curious if there are any ways, once you come into a kind of greater consciousness of your karma and the consequences of your actions, if there are any cheat codes if there are any cheat codes or any
cheat codes.
Yeah, I mean, you enter a greater awareness of where you are in life, and you have maybe half a life of accumulated decisions at this point. That's kind of a weighty recognition of your karma, if you are sort of coming to greater consciousness of that. Or what do you do then? How do you deal with the fact that you have a lifetime of accumulated decisions that you're only now fully aware of their consequence moving forward?
Somebody once said about the tendency of people to speculate about their past lives and stuff. If you want to know your past lives, look at the present. If you want to know your future lives, look at the present. And because this is where we are. So you're seeing, you're perceiving, you're living the consequences of your past karma. And the evidence at your disposal is what's going on in my life right now. What are the good things? What are the challenges? What are the lessons I have to learn? And if I understand your question correctly, it sounds like you're asking as if there was some definitive way to say, this is your karma. Now, what's happening now is your karma. And what happens next week will be the karma you create between now and then, plus all the stuff from the past. I don't want to get into esoteric details, but one of the interesting things about doing the research I did was, and Swami Vedanta in his small book and his talks goes into this a lot. There's more variation about the details of karma and the understanding of it among the Indic traditions and within them than you would think. They don't all agree on the details and nuances, but certain things are agreed upon. The basics of karma are agreed upon. And why was I going into this? And one of the points is that karma is very complicated. So it's not like you have a karma. It's a package. And one of the things that's common is that the types of karma from past lives that will fructify in this life, the karma from early in this life that will fructify in the future, either in this life or a future life, the karma you're creating now in this moment that will fructify later at an undetermined time, an unpredictable time. And that's what we're called upon to understand. To understand all the nuances of our karma, why we were born in this life, why did this happen, why did I have this profession, how did I meet that person, why did this happen? You can drive yourself nuts trying to figure all that out, but you have the evidence in the present. This is my karma. How do I make the most of it? How do I ameliorate the unwanted aspects of it? How do I behave going forward? And that means not just action, but right speech, right motivation, personal transformation. How can I be a better human being? That's really what matters, if I understand your question correctly.
Much of what you said seems to parallel the Greek philosophies, arete and Stoicism. Have you ever looked into the parallelism between those two?
You know, the Stoics are more interesting than I ever realized in, taking a philosophy class in college. And it's only recently that I've read some thinkers who, elucidated the Stoic philosophers. And I don't know enough about it to comment, but it's something really worth looking into.
It's good character, virtue, truth, veritas,
Yes.
and the treatment of others. And it seems to parallel what you're saying.
Sure, because and every system of ethics and proper behavior will have certain overlap. I mean, certain things are universal. There's a version of the golden rule in every tradition on the planet. Some form of do unto others as you, or don't do to others what you don't want done to you, or whatever it is. So there are certain principles. What I find really important and distinctive about the traditions that were born in India and came down to us is this notion of layers, and that it's not just how we behave, but what we are, and how we become, how we can address our character and our identity, our behavior from deeper and deeper levels of being. I don't know if that's part of Stoicism. I don't know if they have the equivalent of sadhana and practices that purify the system and undo the effects of conditioning the way the yogic repertoire does. But that's what I find distinctive, the element, the practical element of practice and transformation from deep within. That, so as I said, the default setting is virtuous.
Going forward.
Going forward.
Going forward, not looking back.
Yeah. So I'd much rather, by automatically responding to situations with love and compassion and kindness than to have to think about it. Because you want it to be your nature to behave in those ways. And so they're to be cultivated.
Be of good character, have good virtue, be truthful,
Yeah.
be trustworthy. It's all the same thing.
Right, but you can transform yourself from within so that being truthful isn't more automatic and you don't have to think about it. Not that I'm not saying there's a guarantee. We always have to think about it. And to be perfectly honest, part of my research into how the, Eastern traditions have been lived here, there's a lot of very wise people who transform the lives of millions of people who misbehaved. So we have to always be conscious of our behavior and our actions and all that. But we improve the odds if we, have spiritual practices that make us, by nature, more likely to express goodness. Uh-oh.
Thank
I have
you.
an old friend who's about to challenge.
No challenges. I'm watching my karma. So can you say something about the phrase burning? There's a phrase of burning your karma.
Burning the karma.
Part of the purification process
Yeah,
that
yeah,
works
yeah.
through those layers.
Yeah, so without going into detail, many of you are familiar with the term samskara and vasanas, the deep impressions that are created through our actions in the world. You could think of it physically, that our experiences create impressions in the brain and nervous system, and that determine our behavior and condition our behavior going forward as we interact in the world. And so there's burning off our karma in the fires of sadhana is one phrase you'll hear, or in the fires of yoga, burning it off the karma. And that speaks to purification and the value of practices like meditation and yoga asanas and the pranayama, all the repertoire of practices in these traditions. One of the values is the direct neutralization of conditioning that is embedded within us. Is that what you're referring to,
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
Yeah. And so, and there's many methods of doing that. And that's one of the tactics, you could say, of improving our karma, is to directly engaging in these practices that, in a sense, liberate us over time from the conditioning of the past. Because every action creates an impression. Those impressions then, at least in part, dictate our future actions and our decisions and our thoughts. And this wheel of action and impression, and they give rise to desires and other actions that create impressions and so forth. And getting off that wheel by burning off some of that conditioning is part of the value of sadhana, of regular practice. And those of you who have a regular practice and have been doing it for some time, you see that. You see the practical effects of that in their life. You make fewer mistakes, perhaps. You make better decisions. And of course, then you're shocked when some other stuff comes up and you say, oh, I thought I was over that. But that's part of the deal. It just improves your odds. I remember when I first started meditating and going on retreats and stuff, and my life transformed. It's one of the reasons I've done what I've done all these years. So I was a mess as a young man. And I thought, oh, this is great. Life just gets better and better. And then suddenly stuff happens. And you say, oh, I thought it was going to get better and better. Why is this stuff happening? Karma. And, I still have things to learn, things to grow. And there's a... there's a passage in the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna talks about having equanimity in loss and gain, pleasure and pain, victory and defeat. And I remember reading that the first time, saying, "Yeah, please, that's what I want. Give me that equanimity, equipoise, peace, inner peace." And then things started getting better. And then I went through some stuff. I don't even remember what it was. And I thought, wait a minute, I thought there was not going to be any more loss and any more defeat, no more pain. No, it didn't say that. It said you'll have more equanimity in the midst of the loss and the pain, victories and defeats and all that. And, I fooled myself into thinking it was going to be that ideal. No, but, life in the world of karma, there's always going to be ups and downs. There's always going to be some degree of disappointment and pain and old age and loss and all that, because we're humans in the world. But how we experience it, what level of inner peace and compassion and goodness can we bring to the situation? That's the challenge, not that there won't be problems anymore. So then that's, another way of looking at karma.
Oh, okay. Okay, hi.
Hi, Gary.
So one thought I had just listening to other questions is I don't believe Indian thought is so distinct from Greek thought or Persian thought. I think even 3,000 or 4,000 years ago, there was communication, and there's some thought that Plato was influenced by Indian thought and had learned that. But I was struck a lot. I learned a new idea from what you're saying about action to create who you are, not just to get some result, but to create who you are. And it struck me how similar that was to a phrase in the hymn we had, which was make your action a sacrament. So that your action is to bring out that divinity, to make you more of that divinity, is to be more of who you are.
That's great. Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And I think one of the things, you find when you investigate these things is, some of the great thinkers in the West that were influenced, it turns out, by Vedanta society, Swamis, and the whole history of Vedantic thought and yogic thought, Buddhist thought. But people like Houston Smith and Joseph Campbell and Aldous Huxley, who were so influential in adapting these teachings to the West, they looked at all the spiritual traditions and articulated in what came to be called perennial philosophy the commonalities that you find in those systems, and most of the focus there is on spiritual experience, the core experiences recorded in the mystical branches of all the religions. And that's, where, as Houston Smith famously said, the exoteric aspects of religion, the externals, the belief systems, the rituals, the histories, and all that, that's where you see all the differences and where people fight. But on the level of spiritual experience, at their deepest, that's the esoteric part of these spiritual traditions. You find commonalities and you find unity, and you find that not only in the descriptions of experiences, of mystical or spiritual experiences, but in terms of their consequences as well. And one of the consequences would be proper action that leads to the creation of character. So some of the treatises on karma will talk about how one of the results of karma is to create habits that are expressed as our character. So what you were saying is that proper action in turn creates character and leads to perhaps deeper experience. Is that what you were saying? Because, that makes sense to me.
Well, especially in terms of, your character, but when it says a sacrament, that means making more holy character, more spiritual character.
So consciously behaving, making your actions an offering, a sacrament.
That's what the hymn said.
What's that?
That's what the hymn we sang said, make your action a sacrament.
Yeah, but you find the same thing in all the spiritual traditions. Make your actions an offering, and if it's a theistic, it would be making an offering to God.
From what you said, that means bring that into your character.
Yeah. But then that becomes, you don't even have that concept unless you have the good karma to come to that point in your life where you can even conceive of making your actions an offering to the divine or a sacrament. And, and the Buddhists say, just go through life as if Buddha himself was walking next to you, keeping an eye on you, and act impeccably, even if no one's watching. And that's their way of saying make it a sacrament, make it an offering. And you see that in the Gita where, Krishna says, make everything you do, everything you say, as if an offering to me. And you'll see it in Judaism, you see it in Christianity as well. And why wouldn't you? Yeah. But it's a good point. So, when you're walking home and the sign says don't walk, but there's no cars coming, what would your offering be? Do you jaywalk?
Yes.
If you're in New York,
If you are, I know. I grew up, I'm a New Yorker by birth and everything, and I moved to LA. My first week in LA, I crossed the street, there was not a car in sight, and I got a jaywalking ticket. And I said, there was no cars coming. I'm sorry, sir, you walked in. I'm a New Yorker. It didn't get me off the hook, though.
Hello.
Hi.
I have a question regarding people that we see in the world that are virtuous and have a big effect on humans. I would say, politicians, celebrities, a lot of positive effect. And yet, you find that they can be very, very ethically challenged. They can be very ethically challenged. Or they didn't pass a test. I'm trying to, if you look at the Epstein files, you see the people on there who've made tremendous strides in the world and for humanity.
Yeah.
And yet it was their Achilles heel.
Sarah, to say you find it among spiritual teachers
Yes,
and
that's
leaders as well.
absolutely. So, I would think that these are very evolved beings because they're having so much impact on humanity, and yet they're challenged. Can you explain that? Is that a test? Is that the fork in the
works
road?
in mysterious ways. It's wonders to perform. Yeah, I don't know how to explain that. People are complicated, and some people become famous and influential and do good in the world. And some people become famous and influential, and it feeds their egos, and it makes them pompous and arrogant and think they can get away with stuff, and they take advantage of people. That's their karma is complicated. And it's, so there's no easy way to explain that except that everybody's karma is mixed. And it's our karma to think, okay, that's the situation. Is there anything I can do? Is there any way I can respond to this situation to make it better? Whether it's calling my
they're
Congress,
showing us an example of what not to do.
There's that too, sure. And it's an and it's in some of these cases it's a lesson for us to not venerate people by what seems to be their outer contribution to the world or a certain quality of charisma, and to make assumptions about them, and to trust them in ways that perhaps we shouldn't, and to be vigilant. And I had to write about, investigate and write about some of the scandals that have happened in spiritual circles. And very often it's deifying a guru or a spiritual teacher for their charisma and intelligence, and not knowing, what shadow stuff is going on underneath it. And it's unfortunate, but we have to be vigilant and be careful about who we put on pedestals.
Thank you.
That's our karma in part, yeah.
So Phil, thank you so much.
Thank you, Diane.
That was absolutely wonderful. And I think we can all wish you enormous success with this wonderful new book, and hope to see you again very soon. Now, on that matter, we do have copies of the book at the back, and Phil has kindly agreed to sign the copies. So as you leave, please line up, and they will be at the back there.